the Complete Web Developer course. As I've mentioned, in this section we're going to be looking at style. So hopefully you have made a website that looks a little bit like this. You can see we've got all the kind of core HTML elements in there, but it doesn't look great. We obviously want to be building beautiful websites as well as useful ones, and for that we're going to need some style. And we create style using cascading style sheets, or CSS. So what on earth is a cascading style sheet? Well, we've actually seen one before. When we looked at the code of example.com, which we get from right-clicking or control-clicking and then view page source in Chrome, you'll remember that we looked over this style section just there. And this is a cascading style sheet. And it's pretty simple how it works. We get the name of the element that we're styling. So body, div, that could be an H1 or a UL or an image or anything. And then we have some curly brackets. And inside the curly brackets, we have some style information. So background color, margin, padding, font family, width, all sorts of things. There's a huge number of ways that we can style our page using cascading style sheets. And the real advantage of them is that they're completely separate from the HTML itself, which does a very useful job then of keeping style and content separate. This generally makes your code more readable, it's easier to update and maintain, and it has a really useful feature that you could completely restyle your website without actually changing the HTML or the content at all. And a nice example of that can be found if you Google CSS. Then you can see we've got W3 Schools at the top here. If you click on the second result, CSS Introduction, then they've got a bit more information about CSS. So if you want to know more, then you can read that. But I'm just going to show you this example homepage here with a certain style sheet. If we then apply a second style sheet to it, the page looks completely different, even though the HTML is exactly the same. We can do that again, style sheet 3, and now it looks like the W3 Schools website itself. Style sheet 4 looks completely different again, and we can even remove the style sheet and we get back to a web page that looks more similar to what we created in the previous section. So to summarize, CSS is a simple and powerful way to apply styling to your websites to make them look great. In the next video then, we'll apply a style sheet to our own web page and see in detail how it works. To our own web pages. First, I'm going to give you a quick challenge, and that is to create a new folder inside your Complete Web Developer course folder called 2CSS, and then create a new HTML file and display it both in your text editor and in your browser, just like this. Go for it. Good luck. All right, I hope you managed that. I'm going to do it by getting the Complete Web Developer course open, and then I'm going to right click or control click and select new folder. I'm going to call it 2-CSS, and then I'm going to go back to my text editor. I'm going to create a new file, just like that, and then I'm going to save as, and I'm going to save it inside Complete Web Developer course 2CSS, and I'm going to call it web page with style.html. It's still an HTML file, even though we're going to have some cascading style sheets inside it. There we go. And then finally, I'm going to go back into my CSS folder here and just open up web page with style into Google Chrome. And there it is. So I'm going to say goodbye to my hello world. I'm going to do a quick test just to make sure that everything's linked up correctly. So I've put some text in there and I'm just going to refresh that. There we go. Lovely. So I hope you managed to do that. Don't worry if you didn't, it's just a bit of file manipulation really. Now I'm going to put in the very basics to get us an HTML page, as we've seen before. So we'll start with an HTML tag. Then inside that we'll have our head, and then we'll have our body section. And I'll just put in a title tag as well, because I like to have a title. We'll call it web page with style. And then if we just refresh that, you can see the content has disappeared, but web page with style has appeared there. All right. Now there are actually 3 different ways of adding CSS to your web pages, and I'm going to show you the first one in this video, and this is Inline CSS. So, very quick challenge. Can you create a pair of paragraph tags and put a sentence, whatever sentence you like, between them? Go for it. All right. Hope you managed that. Pretty straightforward. Paragraph tags are just a P inside the angled brackets there. And I'll have the classic phrase, the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. All right, so now we've got a paragraph. It's not styled at all. So if we want to bring some style into this, if we were going to use inline CSS, we would do the following. Inside the paragraph tag there, we would add a style attribute. And then, just as we usually have with our attributes, we have an equals and then some quotes. And then we can put any CSS we like into this style attribute. So for example, if I wanted to change the color of the text, I might say color. Sadly, it doesn't work if you spell color correctly, but there we go. Color without a U and then blue. So you notice we've got a colon in between there, and that's how CSS works. You have the thing that you want to change, and then a colon, and then the value of that thing. So in this case, color, colon, blue. Fairly straightforward. Save. Refresh, and we have some blue text. Nice and easy. If we wanted to have text which was twice as big, then we would add a semicolon, and we use a semicolon to separate different stylings. So we might want font size, and we might want to set the font size to 200%. And that will then set the font size of this text to twice as big as it was before. Let's have a look. There we go. I've just realized I've got of the lazy dog there. Let's make it over. Brilliant. So that's really all there is to inline CSS in terms of how it works. I'm going to give you a very quick challenge here. Can you create an H1 header tag with the content CSS is cool and then make it green and half the size it used to be? So an H1 tag with the content CSS is cool, but then green and half the size it would otherwise have been. Go for it. All right, hope you managed that. H1 tag, of course, just an H1 in angled brackets. And then CSS is cool, it certainly is. So without any styling at all, it would look like that. With some style, we'd set the color to be green. And then if we want it half the size, we would use font size 50%. All right, let's take a look. Fantastic. Now, one thing that might be slightly surprising there is that it's got a lot smaller than you might expect. That's because this percentage is actually relative to the default paragraph size. So if we make this 100%, it will make it the same size as a paragraph. So if we actually wanted it the same size as the usual H1, the default there is 250%. So an H1 by default is 2.5 times bigger than a paragraph. But don't worry too much about that. Looking at the specific CSS styles later on in this section. For now though, we're done with inline CSS, and in the next video we'll see how to add CSS in a different and better way. Video, we created some stylings using inline CSS. There are a couple of problems with this though. First is, our styling is all mixed up inside our content, which makes it not very nice to read and difficult to maintain. Also, our stylings are linked to a specific paragraph tag. So if I wanted to change all of my paragraph tags to a certain font or color or size, I'd have to add this style attribute to all of them, which is messy. So for that reason, I wouldn't recommend using inline CSS except in very specific circumstances. So the solution then is internal CSS. And this is what we saw in the example.com HTML. So we create some internal CSS by creating a style tag inside the head. We can actually put it anywhere in the HTML, but inside the head section is the traditional place to put it. We then set up a type for our style, and the type is text/CSS. So that then tells the browser that this is some style commands will then be applied to the rest of the document. So let's get rid of all the styles that we have and see how we can apply some styles from here to our code in the body. So just to reset everything, we're now at the start with no style. So if I want to apply, let's say, the color red to this paragraph tag, then what I would do is I would start with a P to say that I wanted to apply this style to all the P tags in the document, and then some curly brackets, add a bit of spacing, and then whatever style I wanted. So I want color, and then you can see we've even got a nice selection of colors here. Beautiful. But I'm going to keep it simple and go for red. Let's have a look. There we go. So that's now applied the color red to that paragraph. So very quick challenge for you. Can you double this paragraph text in size as well as keeping it red? So make it twice as big using internal style sheets. Go for it. I hope you managed it. All we needed was something like font size and then 200%. Let's have a look. Oh no, something's gone wrong. I wonder if you did that. If you did and you realized that you lost all of your stylings, it was probably because you didn't put a semicolon at the end there. And so just like when we were having our inline CSS, we need to separate different styles with a semicolon in internal CSS as well. So now if we have a look, we've got it red and twice as big. Notice you don't need to put a semicolon on the end of the last one, but you can do if you like. I kind of like to because it makes everything uniform and the same. Definitely doesn't cause any problems. So the nice thing about this is that if we then create another paragraph tag, wow, I love internal CSS, something like that, then of course this styling will be applied to that one as well. So if you want to set all of your text to the same font, for example, you could do that very easily with a single instruction in your internal CSS at the top there. So final quick challenge for you. Can you change the CSS's cool header to being pink? Go for it. All right, hope you managed it. Very easy. So just H1 to tell our browser that we want to apply these stylings to all the H1 tags, and then color and pink. And an optional semicolon at the end there. Let's have a look. There it is. Fabulous. So this is internal CSS, and this is how we're going to be applying pretty much all of the CSS that we learn in this section. There is one more way to do it. That is to have all your styles in a separate file, which can be very useful, and I'm going to show you how to do that at the end of this section. What you might be wondering though is how you might apply styles in this way to some paragraph tags but not others. And that's what we're going to look at in the next video. Apply our stylings to multiple HTML elements with just one instruction at the beginning in our style sheet, which is usually great, but what if you have a certain paragraph that you want to look different to other paragraphs? Well, this is actually really easy to achieve using classes and IDs. So let's start with classes and find out how we use those. First off, I'm going to get rid of all my stylings and then just refresh. And you can see the page now looks completely different, even though the HTML hasn't changed at all. So let's say I want to make this first paragraph red, but not affect the second paragraph. Well, what I do is I apply a class attribute to it, and then I can call that class whatever I like. So if I'm just going to make it red, I'll call the class red, but I could use any description I want there. So if we want to apply some CSS to the red class, we don't just type red, we have to indicate somehow that we're applying this to a class. And to do that, we use the full stop or period. So this is known as a class selector because it will select everything with a class of red. And then we just apply exactly the same pattern as before. So the curly brackets and then color, colon, red, semicolon. And then that will apply it just to things that have a class of red. Now that doesn't necessarily have to be paragraph tags. I could apply the class to my h1 tag as well if I wanted to, and then that one would be red as well. So it's a very quick challenge. Could you apply a class of large to this paragraph tag, the second one, and then make it twice as big as the first one? Go for it. All right, hope you managed that. So pretty straightforward. We just use class equals and then large in quotes, and then up in our style sheet we use dot large to select the large class, and then font size colon and then whatever number you want it to be, so 200% for it to be twice as big. Take a look. Fantastic. So really easy to manipulate things in this way. A really nice other feature is that we can apply multiple classes to a single element. So if we wanted this first paragraph to be red and large, we just put a space between them and type them both in. So red and large. Let's have a look. Fantastic. That is now red and large. So that's how classes work. IDs work in a very, very similar way. So let's add another pair of paragraph tags, and this time we'll give them an ID. And let's say I'm going to make this particular paragraph tag green, so I'll call the ID green. And we'll just have some very boring, this is some more text. Okay, so if we have a look at that, of course, there's no styling applied to that paragraph yet, so it's not green. But if we want to make it green, we can do very easily. The difference is, because we're working with IDs rather than classes now, instead of the period or full stop, we use the hash, which on my keyboard is Alt-3. Yours is probably around there somewhere as well, but it might be on the other side of the keyboard. And then the name of our ID, so green. And this is then an ID selector, and it will select IDs with the name of green. And then it's exactly the same as before, color green. Let's have a look. Fabulous. So it works in exactly the same way, but we use a hash instead of a full stop or period. So you might be wondering, well, why do we have classes and IDs then? Well, essentially they have slightly different uses. And the main thing about IDs is they should only be used once per page. So you might have different sections of the page, for example, and you might give them specific IDs because those sections are unique within the page. You probably wouldn't, to be honest, use an ID of green because you might want to make several things green. So essentially that's the difference. Classes can be used more than once, IDs only once. And we'll actually come back to classes and IDs again in JavaScript as ways of interacting with and moving around objects. And there the idea of classes and IDs will become very important once again. All right, so that's classes and IDs. One more thing I want to show you is how we might style some text within a paragraph tag. So if, for example, we want to add, and this text is underlined, then how would we underline just that portion of it using internal CSS? Well, we do that using the span HTML element, and then this span is simply something that we can put around any chunk of text or image or combination of several different things, and then use that to select it. So if, for example, we gave this a class of red, then only the latter bit would be red. Of course, we want it to be underlined. So let's have a class of underlined. And then we'll add in dot underlined to select the underlined class. And then to underline something, we use text decoration and underline. There we go. Remember, at this point, you don't need to remember any of these. We'll introduce them. I'm a lot more familiar with them as we go through this section. But let's just have a look. There we go. So the text is underlined. So that's how you apply styles to text within some paragraph tags. So that's as far as we're going to go with classes and IDs in this video. In the next one, I'll be introducing the div tag, which we did see at the beginning of the HTML section, but you can be forgiven for forgetting it. So now we'll find out what its purpose is and how you can use it to apply styles to a group of HTML elements. See you then.